Joining us now from Ontario, Canada, is philosopher Stefan Molyneux, host of freedomainradio.com, the most popular philosophical conversation in the world. Stefan, thank you so much for joining us. So,
thank you, Adam, and congratulations on the show. It's very exciting.
Thank you, thank you. We're very honored to have you on for our first episode tonight. Well, let's cut to the chase. Tell us, what is the gun in the room? What do you mean when you say that government is backed up by violence?
Well, Adam, there's an old Chinese proverb which says that the beginning of wisdom is to call things by their proper names. And we so often forget this when it comes to government, when it comes to the state. Governments are different from every other social agency that we have, in that governments have a legal right, in fact an obligation in many situations, to initiate the use of force. Not respond to the use of force. Self-defense is a universal right in most legal systems, but to initiate the use of force. And that is very different from what you and I have as legal rights. So I can't go next door and threaten my neighbor with force in order to get him to pay for my child's education. But the government can through property rights and the educational system. I can't find some guy in my neighborhood who's smoking some herb that I find objectionable, lock him up in some basement, and then call myself an armed warrior for justice through the war on drugs. I can't print money based on nothing and use it as legitimate currency. The government can. And I can't create debt that other people have to pay without any choice in the matter. That's called fraud, but for the government it's called deficit financing, and it goes to future generations. So government, by definition, is that social entity which legalizes whatever is criminal for everyone else in the population. And this creates two opposing moral systems, government and private, and they tear societies apart unless and until we find ways to reconcile these opposing moral systems, and we do that by consistently and continuously pointing out that whenever people talk about the government, there is a gun in the room. Law is an opinion with a gun. And once we keep pointing out that there's a gun in the room, and the gun is getting bigger and bigger as government gets bigger and bigger, we can begin to look for peaceful and voluntary solutions to our complex social problems.
Now, you've said that all governments share this nature, that all governments are essentially competing protection rackets. Is there nothing special about America, then, in the human quest towards freedom?
That's a good question. I would say that all philosophy is about definitions. It's irritating that way, but liberating in a way, too. So if you define America as a piece of land with a past and a future, then it's not special. It's just like everything else. But if you define America as the ideals under which the American system was founded, then I think you have something very special in the concept of American exceptionalism. The ideal that America was founded on, of course, was freedom from arbitrary force, freedom from the initiation of force, freedom from tyranny, freedom from theocracy, freedom from aristocracy. And that's why they founded not a democracy, which is all you ever hear about these days, but they founded a republic. In other words, to bind the government down, as Harry Brown used to say, in the chains of the Constitution. And unfortunately, it didn't stay that way. It took maybe 80 years for the government to break out of those bounds and begin its huge growth into the monster that we see today. But I think that America is extremely important in terms of its instructive history. So I don't think it's accidental, Adam, that America started with one of the smallest governments in history and now has ended up with one of the largest governments in history, with an empire the likes of which the world has rarely seen before. Small governments promote economic growth. The Night Watchman State that protects persons and property promotes economic growth. That economic growth causes a massive increase in wealth. The government begins to swallow that more and more. The Leviathan begins to swallow things up more and more, creating more and more control over the economy, strangling economic growth, which is unfortunately the situation that most of the West is in today.
Well, Stefan, I know in Canada you're certainly have good reason to be afraid of what's going on here in America, because you've got it going on there too. But there are those of us here in the United States who are working to bring America back to those ideals. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Adam.
That was philosopher and host of freedomainradio.com, Stefan Molyneux.